Welcome to the Business Development Podcast, brought to you by the Global Business Development Association, delivering the strategies and tactics to boost your career and corporate growth.
Hello, BD Pros, and welcome to the Global Business Development Association podcast called What is Business Development? Now, managing complex business-to-business deals can feel really daunting, and hindsight is a very powerful teacher. Wouldn't you like to transform that hindsight into foresight? Well, I sure would. Well, before we get into that hindsight and foresight, why don't you take a little bit of foresight and think about where's my BD career going? And if you really want to boost your BD career, then grab yourself a copy of the Business Development Body of Knowledge. That is the book you need in order to get your BDP, your Business Development Professional Certification from the Global Business Development Association. And if you like this show, you've been following it, hit the like button, give us a comment, give us a review on the socials and in the podcast systems that you listen to. It motivates me to continue bringing these great authors and leaders and wonderful tactics that you can leverage in your BD career. Okay, let's jump into a book today that I want to introduce you to. It's called Forecasting to Win. It's available on Amazon, and it's managing and winning large deals in B2B sales. And it's a practical guide on how to bridge the gap between the vendor and the customer. And the author of this book has 25 years leading world-class sales teams across Europe and Asia Pacific at industry giants including SAP, EY, Workday, and Thomson Reuters. Tim Sleep's our guest, and he reveals a straightforward yet powerful framework that significantly boosts win rates and sharpens forecast accuracy. His approach is illustrated with compelling case studies which demonstrate real-world applications. So let's bring to the stage our guest today, and Tim Sleep. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tony. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, well, hey, it's great to have you. And I can't wait to jump into this book. But before we do that, Tim, tell us a little bit. How did you get into the business development profession and why did you write the book?
I think I fell into business development and sales really straight out of university. It wasn't something I ever aspired to do, but it's the best job in the world being a salesperson. And you know, the highs are very high, the lows can be low and challenging, and you learn from those. But straight away, quite early in my career, I wanted to lead and manage sales teams and have an impact across people doing that. And so that's why through the organizations that you just referenced there, I've been fortunate enough to lead some really impressive salespeople and sales teams across multiple regions, and got all the war stories to hopefully write some interesting stuff in a book.
Hey, war stories and hindsight packed into a book to give us foresight on how to win in business development. And you're right, it is a wonderful profession. It's so much fun. And a big part of the fun is all of the BD people that you get to work with, people like you, Tim. So thank you again for joining us on the show. And let's jump into your book and talk about the top 3 tactics or takeaways from your book. So let's start off with number 1. What do you have?
Well, I think, first of all, I'll say the title, Forecasting to Win. The book is not about forecasting or how to forecast deals. It is about giving yourself the confidence to be able to predict, I'm going to win. I'm going to win this deal. And actually knowing as early as possible whether the deal is winnable and what you can do to influence it is really powerful in the world of sales. And I focus on deals that can take a year, 2 years, sometimes longer from inception to closing. And of course, there's so much that can change throughout that time. So I think there's no 3 big tips. There's 3 common, I guess, mistakes that people make, or all salespeople love giving good news. They love hearing good news. They want to close the deal as quickly as they can. And I think that my first tip is to always triangulate. Always triangulate, because I've seen in so many instances people hearing one piece of news about a deal and then going down a path on based on that news, and that news was either not completely accurate or one person's point of view, and without triangulating, without being really sure that what you're hearing about the deal is correct and is right and is the view of lots of people, all the decision makers and all the stakeholders, not just the person you speak to, is really important. So, and quite often, the account executive or the business development person, of course, is leading a team of internal account team members. It could be pre-sales, it could be subject matter experts, it can be consultants. So it's a big responsibility, and you want to make sure that if you're going to lead the team down a certain path, that what you've heard is absolutely true. So that'd be the first thing, is just everything, every stage of the way, triangulate.
Well, Tim, I've got to tell you, I don't know of any business developer that I've known of that has over predicted their ability to win a deal.
Well, I mean,
we,
yes.
As business developers, we're all optimistic, aren't we? We have to be to deal with all the challenges that we deal with, right? So sometimes a pipeline, and you look at the probability of win sometimes, and you're like, really? You really think you're going to win it?
I know.
You have an 80% probability of win. Okay, that's impressive. Tell me more.
Yeah, I've had one conversation where someone said we are going to win it. But I think, you're right. You're absolutely right, Tony. Salespeople love giving good news, and the pressure can be great as well to deliver. Whether you're on a monthly cadence or a quarterly cadence, you're asked to forecast what you're going to bring in, and of course, most people love to over deliver, and therefore forecasting is an important part of any salesperson's role. So triangulation is much better, so you don't get those last minute surprises.
Now, when you're talking about the triangulation, Tim, just to drill down a little bit, you're talking about triangulating across the buying committee, whether that's the champions, it's the decision maker, it's the influencers. Is that what you're talking about? And trying to line up the right people on your team, whether it's your internal team, as you said, it could be pre-sales folks, it could be customer success folks, whatnot, all kind of lining up subject matter experts, lining them up to then triangulate exactly the right messaging and the people to talk to on the buying committee. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's right. So you can triangulate through your virtual account team. You can triangulate if there's any external parties involved in the deal. But there's nothing more powerful than having a champion, or I call it a mentor, and that mentor being in the inner circle. So actually, they can influence, and they're in the decision making, and they are very powerful to that decision. If you can get that person on your side, then you've got a far better chance of winning. But even then, I would triangulate with as many of the stakeholders as possible. And the more consistent the message you're getting, the more bold you can be in which tactics you choose to deploy on the back of those buying signals. So it's just a really important trait, and one that I've seen so many times people gloss over. There was one example, I write about it in my book, where we were talking to the deputy CIO, and it was the decision was him and his boss, the CIO, pretty much, and we had triangulated that. But the account exec and the deputy CIO got to a really good relationship where they're WhatsApping each other over the weekend, and what was the outcome of this steering committee, and has the budget been approved, and what's the decision criteria, all these things. And there was no way this deal wasn't going to come in within the time frame that we wanted it to. But the deadline was getting closer and closer, and very close to the end of the deadline, I ended up calling the CIO. My mistake. I should have called him far earlier. And actually, the deputy CIO wasn't the deputy CIO. That's who he called himself. He was a contractor that loved to think that he was a really important influencer, and his decision weighed, didn't have a huge amount of weight. And the whole team had been basing themselves on what this deputy CIO was saying to the account executive over a number of months. And we had just wanted to believe that this was going to happen. The deal did happen. It was a month late. It fell into the following quarter, but we didn't triangulate enough, and we relied on the wrong piece of information far too heavily.
Well, I like what you said there. That's a great story, because not only making sure that you triangulate across the entire buying committee so that you don't single thread
Yeah.
your intel sources and you don't single thread the relationship building, but also don't single thread on your team. Have a
Yeah.
different set of ears engage, ears and eyes engage, and then you can discover these landmines of, uh-oh, this isn't the deputy CIO. This is a contractor with no authority. Okay, so
Yeah,
let's
no,
jump in.
just on that point, that's a really, really good point, Tony. And I think the best account executives, business development, salespeople I've ever seen are very, very comfortable asking their team to triangulate. You know, the slightly less experienced account executives can want to be the hero. They can want to close the deal and bring it home themselves, and they get uncomfortable by using an executive sponsor or someone else on their virtual account team to triangulate via other stakeholders. But doing that is never a bad thing.
Yeah, BD is a team sport, and humility is the key to being a great team player. So, okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. So, Tim, let's jump into number 2. What do you have?
So again, this sounds like a really, really obvious statement, and most of these things are. But I can promise you, all of my war wounds are from watching people not do this or observing others not doing this as well as they might. And it's a very simple one. It's just, knowing your product and your solution and your value proposition is super important. But as important is knowing the competition. So, what are the competition going to be saying about you? What are their tactics? What are they going to be doing? Who is their exec sponsor? What is their virtual account team? What customer references are they going to be bringing out? And the better you know the competition, all you need to do is beat the competition by a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, and all things equal, you're going to be selected. And there's one caveat to that as well. So understand, and then turning into a customer advisor on saying, of course, my competition is going to say this to you. This is what they're going to do. And the more powerful and the more knowledgeable you are about your competition, the more you can lead the prospect down the route of anticipating what the competition are going to say about you and how they're going to act. The caveat to that, or the additional point I would make, is the biggest competitor. The biggest competitor is often do nothing. So you got to be thinking about what are my actual competitors, and then what's the chance of the prospect doing nothing or delaying that decision. And that's a different stream of activity. So they're just a paranoia about understanding what the competition are doing, but always anticipate. It's easier for large organizations to not make a decision than it is for them to make a decision, because making a decision can be scary and it can be bold and it involves change and it involves hard work and it involves people having comfortable internal conversations as well. So making sure that you know the competition, acknowledging the competition can often be do nothing. So it's just that paranoia about really, really bringing home the deal and understanding who the competition are.
Yeah, knowing the competition and understanding what their messaging will be. One of my favorite business development movies of all time is the story about Michael Jordan. The
Yes.
movie's called Air, and
I
there's
write
that one
about it in my
scene.
book. I write it about it in my book, Tony,
Do
and
you really?
that's yep.
See,
I do, and how they advised on how to beat Adidas and how to beat Converse, and expect when you meet Adidas, this is what they're going to do, this is what they're going to say to you, and it was so powerful. And in my field, Google did that brilliantly against Microsoft for about a 2 or 3 year period. About 15, 20 years ago, they were beating Microsoft all over the place where they shouldn't have been, because they knew exactly how Microsoft were going to react as soon as as soon as they realized that there was a threat, they were going to get kicked out to replace them. But no, that you're absolutely right. I've got a big case study on that very movie in the book. Completely agree
yeah,
with you.
I think every business developer should watch that book. I can watch it over and over again and just find new nuggets of business development in each one of those scenes. And it's just a wonderful movie. But even more wonderful is the powerful lesson you just expressed to everybody: is know your competition and know what they will say, and understand them probably better than they can understand themselves.
Yeah.
In my experience is that oftentimes competitors have hubris, particularly if they are the incumbent contractor, already supporting your prospect, and they can feel like we're going to win this. We have it in the bag. And sometimes you can leverage that to your benefit by ghosting what their messaging may be. And there's this rule, kind of unwritten rule in business development, that you never want to speak poorly about your competitors. However, there are ways to express things where you know that your competitor has a significant weakness, and you can highlight those and emphasize those to your customer, to your prospect, as you're engaging with them, and constantly reinforcing those key hot buttons to really elevate it in the prospect's mind of, this is really important. And then they turn around and they ask your competitor, hey, can you guys do this? Well, no. Okay. So I really like what you said there, Tim. Understanding your competitor and their messaging. Okay, so let's talk about tactic number 2. Oh, excuse me, tactic number 3.
Tactic number 3, and again, it sounds obvious, and again, I'd encourage you, of course, I would, to read the book, because it brings it to life in terms of, there's a lot of case studies, and I should add in the book as well, I've asked the chief procurement officer to respond to every chapter to make sure that the other side of the fence is represented. So when you were selling, we often sell to the CIO or the CFO or the chief operating officer, but at some point the chief procurement officer and his or her team get involved in the deal, and they're on the other side of the negotiation table. So to see what it's like from the other side of the table is quite compelling. Hopefully, it's an interesting thing for the readers anyway. But the third one is understand the decision process and understand how to influence the decision criteria. Again, they both sound obvious, but I can promise you, most people that you're selling to don't understand their decision process themselves. They think they do. And there may even be a formal decision process, but there is always an informal decision process as well. And it's never a straight line. So, again, triangulation, it comes back to triangulation as well. But if you're going to forecast accurately in terms of what time period a deal is going to come in, you need to understand the decision process and really triangulate that is what happens. Because again, people like to over exaggerate their individual role, and so often I've seen or I've heard people say, well, I make the decision. The decision's with me. If I say that this is going to happen, it's going to happen. No, you're a stakeholder in the decision process. There's a long period of governance that may involve steering committees, it may involve audit committees, it may involve all sorts of other sort of internal IT and other sort of procurement-led processes before a decision is actually made. So understanding the decision process is important, and knowing that there's a formal one and an informal one. And the other one, very closely linked to that, is the decision criteria, and that changes. So if you, at the start of a sales cycle, you say, what's the criteria that you want to that you're going to make your decision, and typically cost or value is normally quite high on the decision criteria at the start of the sales cycle. And then as you map the length of the sales cycle, there's this little thing called risk, and risk becomes bigger and bigger and bigger as the sales cycle evolves. Criteria for how that decision's made. So consistently and constantly checking in on the criteria and being able to influence that. It's far easier to sell in a positive way than in a negative way. So if you don't do this, this is what might happen to your organization. To imagine if you do this. And you can influence the decision process. You can influence the decision criteria. There's a whole bunch of the tips and tricks on how to do that. But one thing that's going to delay a deal, another thing that's going to delay a deal, is assuming that the person that you're speaking to fully understands the decision process, and what they say is exactly what's going to happen. It's not, especially not with some of these larger, more complex deals.
Yeah, I like what you said about that, Tim. Understanding what the buying process is, and understanding what each individual on the buying committee thinks the buying process is. And I've been in situations where I've talked to one person in buying committee and they are 180 out of phase with the other person on the buying committee. And I will often bring it up to them. Oh, that's interesting. So you think that's the next step, or this is the process? I talked to Bob, who's the CFO, and Bob thinks it's completely different. Oh, really? Oh, but yeah, and then you watch them kind of get on the same sheet of music. And sometimes, that's the value of business developers. We're helping them understand how to get on the same sheet of music. We are informing them on what type of requirements they should consider. I mean, this is our role. Our role is a consultative role and if we're doing it right, we're delivering value every step of the way of, oh, if you do this, that might inject more risk into project execution. Oh, really? I didn't
Yeah,
know about that. Oh, yeah. Let me give you a couple of use case scenarios where I saw it completely destroy a program before. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah. And so
100%.
kind of building that relationship based on value, trust, and shepherding the process.
Yeah.
Tim, tell us a little bit. Yeah, you talked about kind of understanding the process, but how do you typically pull that thread with the prospect?
Well, I think that so there's loads of sales methodologies out there. The one which is in vogue at the moment is called MEDPIC, which is an acronym to basically do what I've said. Who's your champion? What's the decision process? What's the paper process? Who are the influence? You can go through the acronym MEDPIC. There's target account selling. There's Miller Hyman. There's lots of different sales methodologies out there. And part of my motivation for writing the book was that I see so many large organizations now have a sales methodology, but they don't take it seriously. It's a box ticking exercise. And so what my book does is it talks about the quality, the value of doing those things to a really high level of quality. So your champion, you call them champion, I call them mentor, is not always the CFO, and if you write that down and there you go, I've done my forecast, I've used the methodology, you're doing that in a lazy or without triangulation, back to one of my points before, way of going about it. So I think that lots and lots of sales teams use a methodology. They do have a way of doing things, but they don't do it to the level of quality that means that they're not going to have surprises at the end of every quarter. There should be no deals. There should be no deals that slip if you follow the methodology in forecasting to win. And if they do, you're going to know about it in advance, which is why you can, forecast to win rather than just forecast to hope.
Well,
But I think, it's not rocket science, but doing it really, really, really well and simply is difficult.
it is difficult. And some of these concepts may seem simple to folks, but these are first principles for success in business development, particularly in prospecting. And you may hear them from time to time, but it's always great to have these as anchors, even though they sound so basic. It's like when you play a sport. Yes, swinging a golf club seems simple. Swinging a racket in tennis seems simple, but oftentimes things can fall apart mid-swing or in the middle of your game. And going back to those fundamental first principles and getting really good at mastering those is how you have predictable, forecastable success. And you can also get that with Tim's fantastic book, Forecasting to Win. So, Tim, let me summarize some of what we talked about today. Tactic number one, and the key takeaway here was triangulate. Triangulate the buying committee. Understand everybody that's on that buying committee, understand what role they play, and understand not only the buying committee, but your own team and the resources you can bring to bear and the different eyes and ears all involved so that you can all get on one sheet of music. The second key takeaway and tactic was understand the competition, understand them better than they are, understand what they will say, just like you can do in the movie Air, where the lead character was talking to Michael Jordan's mother, and she asked, "Well, what will these other companies say to me when I talk to them?" And he told them spot on exactly what they would say. And that's where, as a business developer, you should always be, is understanding the competition better than they know themselves. Know their weak points. Emphasize those as risk factors when you're talking to the prospects and the buying committee. And then the final tactic is understanding the buying process. Know what the customers and the prospects' buying process is and help get them on the same sheet of music, because oftentimes they're not even in sync and in coordination. And when you do that, you can be a good steward for them. You can be an advocate for them by identifying risk factors, delivering solutions and concepts, and shaping the requirements so that they show up in the solicitation in your favor. These are 3 fundamental key concepts. Again, folks, you can get them in Tim Sleep's book on Amazon. It's called Forecasting to Win. Tim, I think you have a copy of the book there with you in the office, don't you?
Yeah.
Look at that. What a beauty.
3D. Yeah, it's lots of diagrams and big print, so it's not going to take too long to read, but it's hopefully something that's really practical, easy to implement, and good validation of what the great salespeople do already.
Yeah, well, you're a great validation of a salesperson, Tim, and you packed it all into your wonderful book. And we thank you so much for everything you do for the business development profession. How can folks follow you, connect with you?
Well, do you know what? The easiest way is pretty old school. I'm not a massive blogger, but via LinkedIn. I'm always happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. I'm on most of the social channels, but that's the one I'm most responsive to. So, if anyone wants to discuss anything in the book, agree, disagree with me, or just have a good debate, then I'd be very happy to connect initially on LinkedIn.
Oh, well, that's wonderful, Tim. And it's been a joy to talk to you today about your book. Again, folks, it's Forecasting to Win, available on Amazon. And Tim, we thank you for helping us understand how to forecast to win. And we look forward to talking to you when you publish your next book.
Pleasure. Thanks, Tony. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for listening to the Business Development Podcast. Join our free community of corporate partners and business development professionals advancing the art, science, and ethics of the business development profession at gbdassociation.org.